So, last time on Horsemen of the Apocalypse, episode 51, we started off in a bit of a tight spot in a situation our DM had not exactly anticipated. Completely isolated in a cave with nothing but enemies that outnumbered us about, I think, like a dozen to one, along with a powerful boss and his powerful, bodyguard, who ended up being a giant frog monster.
Antis's channel cheer. Thanks, Venice. Welcome.
But so Kurtz was pretty much going one-on-one because everyone else had already retreated, and Finley never really showed up to the fight to begin with.
I was busy.
Yeah, he was licking things.
I was busy.
So Kurtz was in a bit of a tight spot. Urgra was about the only one still who had eyes on him. She was trying to heal him, but things were going downhill real quick. And so she decided to give in to her gift that the masked one gave her, a blindfold that allowed her to share blindness with others. And she did so with a giant frog champion. At that point, Kurtz was able to escape, and Rin got there just in time to see her use the other ability, the Mark of Death, which does not quite sure what it does, but it sure packs a punch, and it killed the champion in one hit.
Okay.
After that, we all regrouped, and we
scary.
found an enormous treasure trove behind a door that was not locked. And
Constantly go wrong.
It was open.
it was totally open. And so we decided to explore a little bit, looked around. Finley immediately started filling his pockets, at which point a completely normal-looking giant lamp, reminiscent of Aladdin, started moving, and a giant wind djinn came out and asked what the F Finley was doing with his treasure.
I was swimming, by the way.
Yeah, he's
All I was swimming
Yeah, Connor.
nonchalantly.
Mm-hmm.
Continue. I'm sorry. You're doing great. Go ahead. Continue.
And so for once, Finley was at a bit of a loss for words when the djinn asked, "What makes you worthy to touch my treasure?" And so, proving that the rod was mightier than the sword, Finley dropped trow and revealed his manhood.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. I was at a loss for words, so I went to my backup.
And what did you roll for your performance check for that?
Oh, something ridiculous.
I think it was a nat 20, wasn't it?
I think it may
or like a
have been.
28
I don't
or
know
something
if
ridiculous.
it was high.
It was really
high. And so, with that, and the smooth casting of suggestion that the djinn failed,
Yep.
the djinn was convinced to go back into his lamp. At which point, most of us still panicking continued to search the room, and Urgra eventually found this small vial of fluid, which we really, really hoped was the antidote we were looking for to the grung poison, which is why we came to this place in the first place.
Okay.
And we decided to try to leave. Turns out the door was locked. So we tried to use our mighty group strength. One of us is strong, the rest of us not so much. And we pulled. Didn't work. Pulled! Then the djinn came back out. And he loomed terrorizingly over us. Rain totally bamped out, completely leaving us to die.
Yep.
And we found that the djinn
Are you
decided
surprised?
to give Finley a reward for his worthiness and gave him a single gold coin written upon it, worthy. We learned that apparently this will allow him to, once per the entire campaign, auto-crit a persuasion roll of his choice.
Pretty sweet.
After that, we were typhooned out of the room, the djinn apparently done with our shenanigans. And luckily we took no damage, but we ended up where we started off in the grung chamber, luckily still deserted. We gathered up our shit and we got the F out and returned to the tiger camp, whereupon some rather shirty negotiations tried to take place. Urgra wanted to just give over the antidote, but the rest of her companions were not quite so generous, having just risked our lives. They wished to secure the safety and preservation of the grung population and from their bullywug enslavers. However, we came to learn that the tigers seemed to realize they were in over their heads and were going to retreat back to the Tabaxi capital. and we're not in a good place to try and rescue an entire civilization of poisonous frog people. This did not please Finley in particular, who decided to do a little emo solo rain walk.
Put on like dark eyeliner as I'm talking. Yeah, like flop my hair back.
However, Urga made a new friend in the White Tiger Tabaxi Lock, who helped her go around and cure many of the affected tiger from the fungal poison that apparently the super grung poison had created. And other than that, Rin learned a great deal about Tabaxi culture, and Kurtz eventually found Finley, and together they comforted each other with dreams of the future involving elephants, ships, and many, many women. And then we took a long rest, and here we are.
Awesome. Yep. So the Tiger Shroud, we're talking about how they were packing up their camp. Fierce was saying that they were going to be leaving at first light, so you guys set up was a hut, right? And then the tents up inside the bubble.
Leoman's tiny hut.
Yep.
I did a tiny hut.
So that's where you guys did your long rest. Kurtz still has his little friend Grug.
So last episode 52, we started off on the morning of day 4 of week 7 of our campaign. We started off in the village of the Tiger Tabaxi. It was still raining. We were luckily under a dome of protective tiny huttery until our wizard walked out and drenched 2 of us, waking us up immediately. However, after a couple of other shenanigans and some very harsh words about Finley wishing to stay to protect the newly discovered enslaved grung population, however, with our current resources not being nearly up to snuff to make a significant difference not leading in our deaths, we decided to put a pin in it and collected our reward for that adventure, which was a small token that we could exchange with a high priest of the Tabaxi named Memoir. So we traveled to the lion village where that priest lived. On the way, we discovered that Kurtz had been doing some thinking. Apparently, he had some idea for a guild to sell his family's land to basically bankroll this so that we would be able to come back to something that would be increasingly growing, even though we only show up for 1 week a year, given our time traveling limitations. After that, we arrived at the Lion Village to a bit of a hubbub. Apparently there were 2 Aarakocra, winged bird people, fluttering around kind of the welcome cat and just giving her a hard time. And apparently they were in a state because their village's eggs were all missing. Now, they were pretty sure this happened to be due to the lizard folk, who apparently were business competitors, but there was no solid proof, and so they were looking for help. After a little negotiation, we all agreed to help them, and we were going to get a ride with them to their village the next morning. But until then, we decided to go to the capital because apparently Memoir was summoned to the Temple of the 3 Goddesses by the High Priestess herself, Tavaria. So there we went. And we eventually found Memoir. Apparently, Tavaria is imposing a compulsory tax of 10% of every tribe's basically, I don't know tax words. We'll say GDP. Income. Sure. 10%. And she wants it now. And so at that point, we split off a little bit. Finley, we recently discovered how to recharge our sister stones, and Finley wanted to engage in that, finding a temple to Salvadine dancing naked and playing his Badalalika. And so Rin and Urgra took positions to make sure his nude revelry was not encroached upon. Meanwhile, Kurtz, having an opportunity, took some one-on-one time with Tavaria and proposed a bargain where he would get his 2 daughters back with her help, and in exchange he would basically serve as an informant and enforcer for her, to the point where she could give him one name and he would kill her so long as the code word of Kingsbane was used. Now, none of the three of us...
her.
Yeah. So none of the three of us knew this, but we did see the end of this conversation, although we could not hear anything due to Tavaria putting up this hereto unknown magical barrier that just blocks everything. Not suspicious at all. Since then, Kurtz has been nothing but roses and nice things to say about Tavaria, which is quite the shift from how he has been in the recent years. This led Urgra to be very suspicious, and to the point of asking him if he would allow her to cast protection from good and evil on him to make sure he wasn't somehow influenced. He agreed until he didn't, after she already wasted the spell slot. And so Urgra's a little pissed. And however, she's a little bit in a better mood since after Rin failing, she was able to succeed in convincing Memoir to trade the token given to us by the leader of the Tiger Tabaxi for a Salvadine Green Sister Stone. So she's in the process of attuning to that. But after that, Kurtz was called aside by a familiar face, Kaldovar, a, at this point, rather up-and-coming guard in the temple's guard. I thought they had a name, but they don't. But anyway, apparently, he and a work friend named Titania, a priestess of the goddesses, have gotten themselves into a little bit of trouble, and they are expecting to be killed because they're pregnant. So at that point, Titania asked to speak to an old mentor of hers, a priestess who has since been on the run named Selena. Now, as she is on the run, no one quite knows where she is. No one except perhaps her sister named Leyenia, who works in a blacksmith at the Hot Anvil.
Heated.
Damn it.
Same.
It's okay.
I
There was a
get it
lot
wrong,
of
too.
terms. Yeah, you were doing really good.
So she beseeched Kurtz to help her, and despite his very, very, very 5-minute-old recent vow to be an informant for Tavaria, thus far he has decided to try and help these two star-crossed lovers. And he has gathered Rin, and it recently came upon Finley and Urgra having a conversation, and basically is saying, we need to go to this place, find this woman, because shit's about to go down. And that's what you missed on HotA.
All right, so let's get a recap. What happened last week on episode 53?
Yeah, Connor.
All right, so last week
Connor.
on Horsemen. Oh, wait.
I didn't say anything. Go on.
Of the apocalypse, Kurtz and Rin had just discovered that there was a bit of a scandal going on in the temple of the three goddesses. A priestess named Titania had found herself with child from a... Wait, what?
The priestess who? What did you say?
It's not Titania?
Tatiana.
Titania's pregnant.
Tatiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard something else.
whatever.
Go ahead. You're good.
Doing great.
So, girl got knocked up, and apparently it was by a temple guard, which is also, as one might imagine, a big no-no with the whole vow of celibacy thing. And so, this priestess, who we had a little bit of dealing with before, asked us to find her old mentor. Now, this was a little tricky. Go
Can I
ahead.
ask a question? Are all the priestesses' last names? Are they always with the last letter A?
So far, yes.
Nyolin wasn't.
That's
Oh yeah, good point. Not Nylan. Oh, she's not a priestess anymore. That's why she didn't have a name.
she was Nylina.
It's a title. That's how you know. I'd be Rinna if I was a priest.
Connor's gonna kill all of us. You better let him do his thing.
What about Urgra? Sorry, go ahead, Connor.
So, finding this mentor was made a little bit more difficult because her mentor had in fact been banished by the current high priestess Tavaria. However, Titania, that's the name?
Tatiana.
Tatiana. Tati. Oh, Tati. I'm calling her Tati.
Okay.
So Tati knew that her mentor's sister, Leyenia, lived in the city and worked as a blacksmith. So we were asked to go find the sister. Possibly she would lead us to her sister, Selena, who was the mentor we needed to get to talk to Tatiana. Is that enough names for all of you?
Yep.
So we went and found Leyenia. Turns out she wasn't very trusting, and the only way to get her trust and therefore to find out where her sister is to get a new material that has been created by this huge amount of storms that has been happening for the past week or even year. We don't know for sure. But apparently when lightning hits a certain part of a certain, I don't know, element, earth, whatever you want to call it, a new element has been formed that is highly valued. And Leania, being a blacksmith, wanted a piece for herself. And so we were sent off to try and collect some. On the way there, we ran into a familiar face, at least for us. The tinkerer and inventor Puck, a tiny little gnome with a little yellow bird named Butterbutt who lives in his beard. Very friendly, but apparently he also was interested in this new material. And he was bringing along a big old wheelbarrow. Somehow he was carrying it by himself. But it wasn't empty to carry things. Instead, it was actually mostly full with a mechanicon. That's what I'm calling it. A metal sort of robot thing. And inside it was a familiar object of a blue orb of the type that Finley Shenanigans has been looking for year after year after year. We decided to keep the orb close and allowed Puck to tag along, also knowing that he was quite clever. So we eventually arrived at what appeared to be some sort of sinkhole into a cavern where the lightning seemed to be concentrated on, and we could see a good amount of this strange silver material. And so Kurtz, Urgra, and Puck descended, soon to be followed by Grug, Finley, and the Mechanicon. I don't know. The robot. It's a robot.
Automaton.
Sure. Construct. Whatever.
Construct.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
Man. It was
We're
a
doing
long
great.
day, y'all.
Can we get some
Hard.
claps in the chat for Connor? He's doing a great job.
Oh,
we
Lord.
love it.
I don't need your pity claps. But yeah. So at this point, we start to try and mine for the stuff. That didn't last very long because the lightning started to rain down on us. Urgra got hit by a giant boulder, thereby saving Puck's life. But then something interesting happened. A lightning bolt struck the construct right in the blue orb, and it came to life.
Did.
Some of us didn't exactly know how to react, but Finley decided to play it safe and attack the thing. Turns out the construct didn't appreciate that, and we had a battle on our hands, a battle that we were losing very quickly. But eventually, whether because it became bored with us or it knew something we didn't, the construct moved to be hit by lightning again and was somehow absorbed into the lightning itself and suddenly was no more. We were all pretty freaked out, but not so much that we didn't use our heads, and Rin used a tiny hut, which prevents us from all damage, at least from above. And we continued to mine for quite a while until we got several samples of this new material. So from there, we decided to go back. Puck was out from the fight. We decided, however, to have a little talk amongst the party, as there had been some high tensions from multiple directions. Now,
A lot of feelings.
sadly, not as much resolution as one might have hoped came of that conversation, but at least the air is mostly clear as far as where people stand. And now we approach with Candoria with this new material, whatever it may be, as well as an unconscious gnome in our midst. Episode 54 took place on 4/14/2020. We were at day 5. We had just secured, one might say, a mine outside of Candoria proper. We survived an encounter with a automaton that had been built by our friend Puck, was struck by lightning, came to life, and tried to kill us. But luckily, apparently, it got bored. It had something better to do because it just got the fuck out when didn't even seem to be bloodied. A bolt of lightning came down and it just hitched a ride and it was gone. So, left a little nonplussed. We decided to get what we came for, which was some new element that had been created by lightning hitting the ground. And we were able to collect quite a bit of it and return back to the capital. One sample we gave to our friend Puck. One sample we gave to a blacksmith, Leyenia. And in exchange, she gave us a soapstone that was enchanted to help us find her sister, which was what little side quest we were on. So we followed the soapstone and eventually came across a winged soldier of sorts. He seemed to want to do battle, although he did give us a good amount of warning to turn around or he would kill us. We ignored that. But eventually, Kurtz was able to talk him down, and we met the sister we were looking for, Selena. We explained to her that her previous protege, Tatiana, was pregnant and in desperate need of advice. And so eventually, we all traveled back to Candoria proper. We were able to facilitate a meeting, and eventually we got Titania out of the temple and to relatives safely with Bishop, the Winged Guardian, and Selena, who have now traveled back through teleportation to where they were safe previously. Now, before we closed, one of our players went a little rogue and decided to take down the man, or the woman, as it is in this campaign, the head priestess of the temple, Tavaria. He essentially altered his form to make him appear like one of the temple priestesses, Titania, in fact, and made it so went into a crowded location and made it seem that something was not right with the temple, and that whenever Titania was about to spill secrets about Tavaria, horrible things happened to her, including disfigurement, turning into a devil, and just very grotesque imagery. But that is where we left off, with Rin escaping into the night to rejoin our group.
Let's get the recap from Connor for what happened on episode 55.
A long fucking week, guys.
Yeah. So we started off pretty much the morning of day 6 of the week, and we woke up in our trusty Red Dragon Inn to find there were some occupants, despite us rising at a very early hour. We're talking about stuff that had happened the night before, which Rin knew because he's the one who caused it. Going to a tavern, altering his self-appearance, and becoming like a priestess, who then transformed upon possibly revealing secrets of the High Priestess. He was hoping to spread discord about the intentions of the head priestess Tavaria, but unfortunately, at least as far as the group we met, the first-hand witness appeared to be a fan of WrestleMania and was more interested in the clotheslining than the actual what was said by Rin during the entire event. After that, we were about to leave, and Finley went to go to the bathroom, and it turns out there was a mimic in the bathroom.
Yep.
So that was a thing we had to deal with.
Yep.
Other than that, our trusty friend Lou, the bartender, was missing. We did a little investigation, but could not find any actual sign of his whereabouts. So we locked everything up for safekeeping and went on the rest of our journey because we had a time limit, which was further delayed by the appearance of an NPC, a construct that was made by a tinkerer gnome named Puck. Now, this construct we know very little about, except that it's very big, very powerful, and was brought to life by lightning. And appropriately, it arrived with a bolt of lightning. And it asked us some questions. Very, some would call innocent, naive questions. But one important point is that this construct seems to be charged by a blue orb, one of many that Finley has it in his mind to collect all of. Gotta catch them all.
Yes.
To the point where, having lost track of this NPC in the past as it escaped through lightning, he decided to make sure that didn't happen again and used his transedial relic, a ladybug bracelet of immense power.
It's an anklet. It's an anklet, Connor. Okay. I'm sorry.
For
Continue.
you, it should
great.
probably be a belt.
That's fair.
But yeah, so he used its most powerful thing, which is to transform himself into a completely defenseless little Poopa larva and have essentially a kamikaze bomb go at his enemy.
Beat me.
And it did over 100 damage in one hit.
I had flashbacks.
Unfortunately, at that point, he was useless for the next 2 hours, so he wasn't much help in the combat. So that left the three of us who did not know of his plan to fight this now completely enraged construct. Kurtz, as per usual, did a lot of damage and then took one for the team and went down. Rin was playing some offensive game, which we were all very impressed with, but it was Urgra who finally took the final shot and ended the life of this construct, securing the blue orb. Okay. After that, Kurtz decided that Finley needed a timeout and knocked him out in Poopa form still. And that allowed the rest of us to have a chance to have a conversation about our concerns that Finley seemed to be changing. This led to Urgra also admitting to changes about herself, since picking up her 2 new items. One, a bow from the previous horseman we killed. The second, a blindfold from what we know as the Masked One, a very powerful entity who also was the benefactor of Finley's mask. The 3 of us decided that we should try to temper the use of these items, since they seem to be causing changes in the personality and not necessarily for the good. Urgra tried to get rid of the bow, hiding it somewhere to pick up later, only to find that she thought she hid it, but she ended up in camp with it in her hand. Kurtz tried to hold onto it for her, but the bow grew spikes, making it impossible to hold for him. And so at this point, Urgra has said that she would do her best to restrain herself from using these powerful and apparently dangerous objects. We were, however, able to convince Finley to trade his mask for one of the blue orbs that we ended up killing a fairly innocent creature for. And so hopefully that temptation is out of his reach. And with that, we ended up at the Lion's Village waiting for our Aarakocra rides to fly us to our next adventure.
But first, we need to get a recap from Connor, who is blindfolded. So let's see how this works.
Oh, God.
Go off memory.
I can't read this at all.
You don't need your eyes to read.
Last time. I don't do Braille. That's a fun fact about me. Last time, we started off having defeated a automaton created by our friend Puck, completely on the whim of Finley Shenanigan, who really wanted a blue ball that was its power source. We were able to barely succeed. Kurtz fell, and Finley used his Transdial Relic, using the kamikaze attack of the Ladybug bracelet, anklet, whatever he chooses to wear at the time.
Good save.
Destroying a large part of the countryside, and rendering him completely useless for 2 hours as essentially a larva of a ladybug. Said larva was then beat the shit out of by Kurtz Gladskin into unconsciousness, whereupon Rin, Kurtz, and Urgra had a bit of conversation about the changes in the group, specifically some of the individuals, Urgra and Finley, who had been changing a bit as of late towards a bit more of a chaotic, if not darker side. Urgra shared a little bit more about her 2 cursed items, the blindfold as well as the bow that was collected from the corpse of the first horseman, and how they actually have some negative side effects and don't just make her super powerful. It was decided that we should try to make it so she doesn't use them anymore. That didn't work out too well. So we continued, and eventually we met up with the Aarakocra, who we promised to help. Finley turned back into his normal form, and the second in command of the Aarakocra just kept on flying right in front of Urgra, pissing her off, and she got in a real lucky shot with a crit and had him ass over kettle into the dirt. Whereupon that Birdman grabbed her and just flew her several hundred feet up in the air and demanded an apology, or else he would drop her. She, like a teenager, apologized, totally sincere. And eventually we were led to the home of the Aarakocra. But not before Finley discovered a new talent, an ability to decipher the code of the Cult of Chaos. Sadly, this was not an in-game mechanic. This was a cipher, actually 2 ciphers, that were given to Kyle in person with no preparation.
Super fun.
Where he was told to decipher on the spot.
Great time.
And the 3 of the rest of us just got to dance and vamp and try and fill the time. Eventually, we found out that apparently the cults of chaos are directly related, it would seem, to the creation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and they are trying to, in fact, improve whatever means they have to create a horseman, which apparently requires sacrifice of some kind. Having no more time to think about that, and also having a quest to rescue the Aarakocra's eggs, which they left completely undefended. That's kind of on them. We decided to inquire the prime suspect, which is a tribe of lizard folk. And we arrived to find them pretty much completely just ready for an all-out assault. They were behind walls. They had 30-odd spearmen just ready to kill anything that came close. And so, therefore, we sent our fighter to try to negotiate. He offered gold, but he wanted to see eggs first. Show me the eggs. Lizardmen refused, but we did get a little bit close up and personal with what appeared to be their leader-ish person named Itchy, or was it just Itch?
Itch.
I remember because with Itchy and Scratchy, that's what I kept on thinking.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. However, communications broke down a bit. Urgra may have grappled him and held him at scimitar point to use him as a human shield from his many, many, many spearmen. However, he got away, but eventually, when we were able to show that we were magical, that caught his attention, and he invited us to go unarmed into their stronghold. And it was decided that Rin, who still has not been discovered, and Urgra would stay back, while Kurtz and Finley would enter into the encampment completely unarmed. So, last week, episode 57, we started off, as all good D&D groups do, with a party split. We had this tough nut to crack, a lizard folk village which had possibly stolen a bunch of Aarakocra eggs due to the Aarakocra's own ineptitude, but we were sent in there to try and either bargain them back or find information. We had hit a bit of a dead wall, a dead end, and a wall, a dead wall, until some of our players showed some magical ability, which sparked the interest of one of the higher-ups of the lizard folk, which allowed Kurtz and Finley to enter unarmed into the lizard folk village to meet the chief. Now, meanwhile, Urgra and Kurtz, Urgra and Rin, I don't know why I can't talk to the guys, decided to do a perimeter check for any sort of weak links in this defenses. So they found one, and conveniently, in a hut right next to the weak point, they found not eggs, but a huge amount of little Aarakocra chicks, just as adorable as can be. And to that point, we decided to try to free them and just get out, and that was our plan. And so Rin decided to make a distraction. With a village this big, with this many lizard folk, he decided to make a big distraction. So he used his fire methods to set fire to multiple places surrounding the village, hoping to draw the defenses away from where we wanted to infiltrate. Meanwhile, Kurtz and Finley met the chief. Suffice to say, he was not very nice, to the point where he gave them a little Aarakocra chick back. Sadly, this Aarakocra chick had been mutilated with its wings torn off. And the chief told them to send the message that the Aarakocra need to either get out or offer unconditional surrender, or they will kill their kids, or at least mutilate them. So with that uplifting news, Kurtz and Finley made their exit, also having to pay all the gold on their persons to get out alive. And they met back up with Urgra and Rin, who found out that, turns out, setting fires to everything tightened security somewhat, as opposed to the opposite. But hey, live and learn. At that point, we met outside the village and were lifted back to the Aarakocra village by our Aarakocra friends. At that point, we spoke with a hierarchy, including their chief, Ark, who, upon hearing the state of what his leadership had done, was challenged for the leadership by his second-in-command, Kree. The battle was rather lackluster, as Ark felt he deserved to die, and followed through by jumping off of the floating island where the Aarakocra lived to his death. At that point, all the members of our party offered some advice to the new chieftain Kree, whether it be Kurtz offering sort of logistical battle information, or Rin and Finley, who are now out on a mission to talk to the nearby Tabaxi, the Shroud, to see if we can possibly get some last-minute allies before our attack at dawn.
Connor, hit me.
All right, so last episode, to make it pretty short and sweet, Finley and Rin went off to the Tabaxi to try and gather allies, which they were able to do with our old companion, a white tiger named Locke, who apparently invoked some sacred right to take on leadership as a test for his progression in the Shroud. This was given some raised eyebrows, but he was eventually given, I think, 8 Tabaxi warriors to travel back with us to lend support for the Aarakocra battle versus the lizard men who vastly outnumber them. While there, they also stocked up on a lot of oil that was to be used in a bomb, which went off when our campaign started against the lizard folk, destroying a large part of their wall and allowing us entry into their fortress. However, a smart thing Sean did was arrange some macros to prevent us from having to do like hours and hours and hours of combat. But funny thing about macros, sometimes they really screw you over. And indeed, screwed we were. So by the time we got to the actual combat portion of this campaign against Dirkos, the lizard folk chieftain who mutilates little innocent baby chicklets, we were a little worse for wear. However, we decided to fight on because we weren't going to retreat because that would have killed us. And so we jumped in. Kurtz immediately got turned into a newt, but he got better. And
twice now, by the way.
We are basically fighting for our lives. We have found out that Dirkos has some kind of magical weapon which allows himself to heal every time he hits. He has a pet spellcaster who is really making things tough, and he has a lot of little minions that we have killed maybe one of them. So things are going great.
Yeah. Okay.
Last time on episode 59, we brought the year 7 to a conclusion. It took us, 15 episodes or so? It seemed like that. So we ended with a final battle between a lizardmen tribe that apparently practiced genocide against Aarakocra, but we were able to kill their leader, send them running with their tails between their legs while still getting the Aarakocra eggs back to where they came from. After that, we said our goodbyes and we started back to Alundra, our divine patron, if you will, who had a little more information after we had collected 5 of these blue orbs that Finley has been collecting throughout the years, and it seemed to restore some of her memory. But sadly, not as much as we would like, as we had answers that she still could not find the words for.
Every fucking time.
So with that, we continued to move forward in our chronological progression to year 8 of our 20-year campaign. And it seemed pretty simple. We found ourselves back in King's Glade outside of the capital of Candoria, but it didn't take long before we found we were followed by someone who seemed a little familiar.
I got it.
That actually took me a hot second. Holy hell. Okay, continue.
It was a tiny doll that had the same appearance as Kurt's Gladskin. We have seen this before, and we believe that this is a sign from one that is called the Masked One, who has already given gifts to both Finley and Urbra, and we have been told in a note to go to where Kurtz tasted the forbidden fruit in, of course, for this campaign, a fucking cave.
Connor, what happened last week on episode 60 of HotA?
Well, we started off on a rather mysterious step. We found that we were being followed by a little Kurtz doll. This doll had a rather threatening note telling Kurtz that in the cave where he ate the forbidden fruit, those that he loved were in imminent danger, and if he hurried, he may be able to save them. Now, none of us knew what that meant, but Kurtz was willing to share after telling us we needed to haul ass and get there ASAP, to a cave where he once tactfully retreated from a battle, an unwinnable battle, where he and his head lieutenant, a woman named Alex, got refuge. He also shared that apparently, due to just lack of any sort of rations, water, etc., he ended up having to eat Alex to stay alive himself. Some of us took that a little rougher than others, but eventually, before we could really talk out our feelings, we ended up at the cave. And upon entering, we found 2 more people from Kurtz's past. A hobgoblin named Havoc, who apparently was a specialist at defeating magic users, and a human named Philip, who apparently was more than what he seemed. Now we began to engage in conversation, only to find ourselves completely surrounded by scores and scores of archers, ready to let loose on us on the slightest sign of combat. Their demands were for Kurtz to go in further alone and talk to their leader, who apparently had those that he loved. We left with very little choice, we agreed, and Kurtz went further into the cave, finding lots of torture devices, Iron Maidens, racks, and other such things from his past. And another thing from his past, his lieutenant, Alex, seemingly alive and wearing a strange gauntlet on her hand. And behind her, tied up and apparently in some sort of perhaps enchanted sleep, was his brother, Himmler, his wife, the wood elf Anna, as well as his 2 long-lost half-elf children, Cassandra and Emily. His lieutenant, Alex, then proceeded to tell him that he was being given a choice to either save one group of them, his daughters, or his wife and his brother. He would be able to choose, but whoever he didn't choose would immediately die. He eventually, after much soul-searching, chose his daughters, and immediately a seeming hellscape pit emerged under his wife and brother, and they were instantly incinerated into nothing, completely unrecognizable by anyone. Once this happened, Kurtz fought Alex, and it was quite a fight. They were both very well matched. Kurtz using his divine magic, Alex using this apparently unknown power from the gauntlet. But it seemed to be the tipping point was the first activation of the Carvalia Stone, which allowed Kurtz to gain the benefits of a barbarian rage and severely hampering the damage output of Alex.
That was an MVP play right there. That was like, continue. Okay, that was huge though. We did.
It was huge.
Emphasize how huge that shit was, but
it was huge.
Continue.
That was my last fuck. Like
yeah.
Oh, he finally gave it.
Oh, what? No way!
It only took 60 episodes.
240 hours, but we finally got that last fuck.
Yeah. Eventually, though, Kurtz was able to strike down Alex, and after she fell and with some final taunting words, he realized that the gauntlet she was wearing was now on his hand. The rest of the party, once this happened, noticed that all of Kurtz's past legion, who were the ones who were holding us hostage, seemed to disappear into dust, leaving behind several seemingly valuable treasures but with them. However, we ignored those for now and rushed forward to see Kurtz, trying to wake his daughters, or rather, I'm sorry, I mixed up first. Upon Alex dying, his legion apparently seemed to turn on him in Kurtz's eyes and seemed to attack him as ephemeral ghosts. None of us could see this except for Kurtz trying to swing wildly at apparently endless enemies. And in Kurtz's eyes, once he swung at them and killed them, they seemed to disappear. Eventually, the 2 half-elf girls were resurrected and were charmed by everyone's favorite halfling bard, Finley Shenanigan, and taken away from their father, who seemed to be having a bit of a midlife crisis. Once everyone got their shit together, however, we left the cave after collecting some of the loot that was dropped by these ghosts, and we made our way out of the cave. and something unusual happened. Kurtz, who was seeming to be dead set on bringing his daughters to Dabaria for the sheer purpose of her being a very powerful ally and being able to protect them, decided to heed his daughter's wishes instead to return to Solomon and the hideaway in Glanchester where future priestesses are trained.
Mm-hmm.
So we set out upon the road, Finley turning into a giant, what was it, a giant badger,
Yep.
with an intelligence of 2.
Which isn't much
And-
better than or worse than. Anyway, continue.
No. But eventually we made our way there. Night has fallen. We have the girls in tow, and we are just apparently about to round to see our first view of Glanchester and see what it might hold.